Hello. So this is week 3 of reading practice. How do I sound? It's been so every day in the morning I spent about 30 minutes or 1 hour practicing reading. It's been this book, 21st Century, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, blah blah. And it's been okay. Last week I figured out you need to speak from your stomach, not just throat. So I think it's because of my Japanese background. Uh, I had no trouble speaking or pronouncing the word with the like a throat only. Sorry, my brain's a little slow. I just woke up today. Anyway, uh, but if you need, like, if you use your stomach to breathe out, then it's a lot easier to pronounce. So R, the sound like R, P, K, L, L is okay. It's not too bad. But those like strong consonant, P, K, 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 S, S is okay. S is okay. So K, P, R, R, R. So if I do it from throat, it would be R, R. But from stomach, it'd be R, R, R. So it's easier, which is great discovery. Like I didn't know that. I didn't know this is the cause of my hard to hear voice. Hopefully, it sounds better now. Anyways, so I'm gonna try to use my stomach, and I'm gonna be reading this same verse from Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche, and this chapter 9. What is noble? Okay, so let's see how it goes. 257. Every elevation of the type man has hitherto been the work of an aristocratic society, and so it will always be a society believing in a long scale of gradations of rank and differences of worth among human beings, and requiring slavery and some form or other, without the pathos of distance, such as grows out of the incarnated difference of classes, out of the constant outlooking and downlooking of the ruling caste on subordinates and instruments, and out of their equally constant practice of obeying and commanding, of keeping down and keeping at a distance. That other, more mysterious pathos could never have arisen, the longing for an ever new widening of distance within the soul itself, the formation of ever higher, rarer, farther, more extended, more comprehensive states. In short, just the elevation of the type man, the continued self surmounting of man, to use a moral formula in a supermoral sense. To be sure, one must not resign oneself to any humanitarian illusions about the history of the origin of an aristocratic society, that is to say, of the preliminary condition for the elevation of the type man. The truth is hard. Let us acknowledge unprejudicedly how every higher civilization hitherto has originated. Man with a still, man with a still, man with a still natural nature, barbarian in every terrible sense of the word, man of prey, still in possession of unbroken strength of will and desire for power, threw themselves upon weaker, more moral, more peaceful race, perhaps trading or cattle rearing communities, or upon old mellow civilizations in which the final vital force was flickering out in brilliant firework of wit and depravity. At the commencement, the noble caste was always the barbarian caste. Their superiority did not consist first of all in their physical, but in their psychical power. They were of all in their physical, but in their psychical power, they were more complete man, which at every point also implies the same as more complete beasts. 258. Corruption. As the indication that anarchy threatens to break out among the instincts, and that the foundation of the emotions called life is conversed, is something radically different according to the organization in which it manifests itself. When, for instance, an aristocracy like that of France at the beginning of the revolution flung away its privileges with sublime disgust and sacrificed itself to the excess of its moral sentiments, it was corruption. It was really only the closing act of the corruption which had existed for centuries, by virtue of which that aristocracy had abdicated step by step its lordly prerogatives and lowered itself to a function of royalty, in the end, even to its decoration and parade dress. The essential thing, however, in a good and healthy aristocracy is that it should not regard itself as a function either of the kingship or the commonwealth, but as the significance and highest justification thereof, that it should therefore accept with a good conscience the sacrifice of a legion of individuals who for its sake must be suppressed and reduced to imperfect man, to slaves and instruments. Its fundamental belief must be precisely that society is not allowed to exist for its own sake, but only as a foundation and scaffolding by means of which a select class of beings may be able to elevate themselves to their higher duties and in general to a higher existence. Like those sun-seeking climbing plants in Java, they are called Sippomatador, which encircle an oak so long and so often with their arms, until at last, high above it, but supported by it, they can unfold their tops in the open light and exhibit their happiness. I'm just gonna comment on the previous two verses. I like the wording Nietzsche uses. So the words such as beast or complete man and complete beast. So that's the noble category. And for the non-noble, he called it instinct. So people who are not really using their brains are more beast. It's ironic, but that's what he's implying, because usually the beast or the instinctual one, and they're moving with like whatever biology tells them to. But the beast are, for him, is actually, I think it's integrated character, like integrating the true desire of human beings and put on top, whereas in the instinctual one is maybe based on more suppressed uh, emotion of the biological nature. Hmm. It's an interesting twist. I mean, it might be just a play of words, like instinct or not. Instinct versus beast. It's more like ironic. Like it catches people's attention. That's like the way Nietzsche is right. But it's not like a logically correct metaphor. Still makes sense, yeah. I like it. I like it. Beast and instinct. Instincts are like quite demotivating or kind of the downplaying all people who follow blindly to the rules. Anyways, that's that. And what else do I have? So 259 to refrain mutually from injury, from violence, from exploitation, and put one's will on a par with that of others. This may result in a certain rough sense in good conduct among individuals when the necessary conditions are given, namely the actual similarity of the individuals in amount of force and degrees of worth, and their correlation within one organization. As soon, however, as one wished to take this principle more generally, and if possible, even as the fundamental principle of society, it would immediately disclose what it really is, namely a will to the denial of life, a principle of dissolution and decay. Here, one must think profoundly to the very basis and resist all sentimental weakness. Life itself is essentially a appropriation, injury, conquest of the strange and weak, suppression, severity, obstruction of peculiar forms, incorporation, and at the least, putting it mildest, exploitation. But why should one forever use precisely these words on which for ages a disparaging purpose has been stamped? Even the organization within which, as was previously supposed, the individuals treat each other as equal, it takes place in every healthy aristocracy must itself it be a living and not a dying organization. Do all that towards other bodies which the individuals within it refrain from doing to each other, it will have to be the incarnated will to power. It will endeavor to grow, to gain ground, attract to itself, and acquire ascendancy, not owing to any morality or immorality, but because it lives, and because life is precisely will to power. Or no point, however, is the ordinary consciousness of Europeans more unwilling to be corrected than on this matter. People now rave everywhere, even under the guise of science, about coming conditions of society in which the exploiting character is to be absent. That sounds to my ears as if they promised to invent a mode of life which should refrain from all organic functions. Exploitation does not belong to a depraved or imperfect and primitive society. It belongs to the nature of the living being as a primary organic function. It is a consequence of the intrinsic will to power, which is precisely the will to life. Granted that, as a theory, this is a novelty. As a reality, it is a fundamental fact of all history. Let us be so far honest towards ourselves. Yeah, I like this verse, this section. It's like very politically incorrect, and I can see why it angers many people. Like for example, there is a so like he's saying life itself is will to power. It sounds like we are all like dominating chimps and like wanna be aggressive, and it's justifying that. At the same time, we do that. Like that's proven by actions that that's there. So for example, I always see like Aboriginal museum in Canada, and we try to promote diversity, etc., which is okay. Like that's fine. But I guess my question is like, it's more like top down. Like you have like okay, but we are not gonna leave Canada, like the government of Canada, even if they grant all this, rights and control over to Aboriginal people or like celebrate it. Uh, from media perspective, Canadian government holds the real power. Like Aboriginal people cannot take over the land anymore, nor Canadians, me included, are not willing to leave the country anyway. So I always found that a little bit of uh, power politics that people don't want to talk about. And I also found that aristocracy that we say we care about them and we celebrate them, but as long as like they don't be that aggressive and they don't be too overcoming too strong, as long as they don't hold the power, we hold the power and then we grant this kind of recognition. That's like how, or from Nietzsche's point of view, that's the will to power, and that's the nobility. And the Canadian government, or the people who say Aboriginal people should be respected, are from the standpoint of nobility, and they wanna. I don't know. I always found that a little bit more snobbish, thinking like a moral superiority towards other against other groups. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's yeah. No, well, that seems a little countering against Nietzsche's description of novelty, though, because noble people are not snob or claiming superiority from Nietzsche's perspective. Mm. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe there are two distinctions there: the nobility, noble people, versus like snobs. I guess snobs who are saying, oh, we care about the minority rights, whatever, when they don't really do anything. I think they want to be one of the real nobles who hold the actual power, but they don't have it, but they still claim to be, and there are a lot of people like that, I imagine. So, um, yeah, that's their will to life, I guess, will to power. It's like a moral superiority. Yeah, so that's 259. 260, in a tour through the many finer and coarser moralities which have hitherto prevailed or still prevail on the earth, I found certain traits recurring regularly together and connected with one another, until finally two primary types revealed themselves to me, and the radical distinction was brought to light. There is master morality and slave morality. I would at once add, however, that in all higher and mixed civilizations, there are also attempts at the reconciliation of the two moralities, but one finds still oftener the confusion and mutual misunderstandings of them. Indeed, sometimes their close juxtaposition, even in the same man, within one soul, the distinctions of moral values have either originated in a ruling caste pleasantly conscious of being different from the ruled, or among the ruled class, the slaves and dependents of all sorts. In the first case, when it is the rulers who determine the conception good, it is the exalted, proud disposition which is regarded as the distinguishing feature, and that which determines the order or rank. The noble type of man separates from itself the beings in whom the opposite of this exalted, proud disposition displays itself. He despises them. Let it let it at once be noted that in this first kind of morality, an antithesis, good and bad, means practically the same as noble and despicable. The antithesis, good and evil, is of a different origin. The cowardly, the timid, the insignificant, and those thinking merely of narrow utility are despised. Moreover, also, the distrustful with their constrained glances, the self abasing, the dog like kind of men who let themselves be abused, the mendicant flatterers, and above all, the liars. It is a fundamental belief of all aristocrats that the common people are untruthful. We truthful ones, the nobility in ancient Greece, called themselves. It is obvious that everywhere the designations of moral value were at first applied to man and were only derivatively and at the later period applied to actions. It is a gross mistake, therefore, when historians of morals start with questions like why have sympathetic actions been praised? The noble type of man regards himself as a determiner of values. He does not require to be approved of. He passes the judgment. What is injurious to me is injurious in itself. He knows that it is he himself only who confers honor on things. He is the creator of values. He honors whatever he recognizes in himself. Such morality equals self glorification in the foreground. In the foreground, there is the feeling of plenitude, of power which seeks to overflow the happiness of high tension, the consciousness of a wealth which would fain give and bestow. The noble man also helps the unfortunate, but not or scarcely out of pity, but rather from an impulse generated by the superabundance of power. The noble man honors in himself the powerful one, him also who has power over himself, who knows how to speak and how to keep silence, who takes pleasure in subjecting himself to severity and hardness, and has reverence of all that is severe and hard. Wotan placed the hard heart in my breast, says an old Scandinavia saga. It is thus rightly expressed from the soul of a proud Viking. Such a type of man is even proud of not being made for sympathy. The hero of the saga therefore adds warningly, he who has not a hard heart when young will never have one. The noble and brave who think thus are the farthest removed from the morality which sees precisely in sympathy or in acting for the good of others or in disinterestment the characteristic of the moral, faith in oneself, pride in oneself, a radical enmity and irony towards selflessness belong as definitely to noble morality as do a careless scorn and precaution in presence of sympathy and the warm heart. It is the powerful who know how to honor. It is the powerful who know how to honor. It is their art, their domain for invention. Their domain for invention. The profound reverence for age and for tradition. All law rests on this double reverence. The belief and prejudice in favor of ancestors and unfavorable to newcomers is typical in the morality of the powerful, and if reversely, men of modern ideas believe almost instinctively in progress and the future and more lacking in respect for old age, the ignoble origin of these ideas has complacently betrayed itself thereby. A morality of the ruling class, however, is more especially foreign and irritating to present day taste in the sternness of its principle that one has duties only to one's equals, that one may act towards beings of a lower rank, towards all that is foreign, just as seems good to one, or as the heart desires, and in many cases, beyond good and evil. It is here that sympathy and similar sentiments can have a place. The ability and obligation to exercise prolonged gratitude and prolonged revenge both only within the circle of equals. Artfulness in retaliation, refinement of the idea in a friendship, a certain necessity to have enemies as outlets for the emotions of envy, quarrelsomeness, arrogance, in fact, in order to be a good friend. All these are typical characteristics of the noble morality, which, as has been pointed out, is not the morality of modern ideas and is therefore at present difficult to realize and also to unearth and disclose. It is otherwise with the second type of morality, slave morality. Supposing that the oppressed, the suffering the unemancipated, the weary, and those uncertain of themselves should moralize, what will be the common element in their moral estimates? Probably a pessimistic suspicion with regard to the entire situation of man will find expression, perhaps a condemnation of man together with his situation. The slave has an unfavorable eye for the virtues of the powerful. He has a skepticism and distrust, a refinement of distrust of everything good that is their owner. He would fain persuade himself that the very happiness that there is not genuine. On the other hand, those qualities which serve to alleviate the existence of sufferers are brought into prominence and flooded with light. It is here that sympathy, the kind helping hand, the warm heart, patience, diligence, humility, and friendliness attain to honor. For here, these are the most useful qualities and almost the only means of supporting the burden of existence. Slave morality is essentially the morality of utility. Here is the seat of the origin of the famous antithesis, good and evil. Power and dangerousness are assumed to reside in the evil, a certain dreadfulness, subtlety, and strength which do not admit of being despised. According to slave morality, therefore, the evil man arouses fear. According to master morality, it is precisely the good man who arouses fear and seeks to arouse it, while the bad man is regarded as the despicable being. The contrast attains its maximum when, in accordance with the logical consequences of slave morality, a shade of depreciation, it may be slight and well intentioned, at last attaches itself to the good man of this morality. Because according to the servile mode of thought, the good man must in any case be the safe man. He is good natured, easily deceived, perhaps a little stupid, and bonhomme, that's German. Everywhere that slave morality gains the ascendancy, language shows a tendency to approximate the signification of the words good and stupid. A last fundamental difference, the desire for freedom, the instinct for happiness, and the refinement of the feeling of liberty belong as necessarily to slave morals and morality as artifice and enthusiasm in reverence and devotion are the regular symptoms of an aristocratic mode of thinking and estimating. Hence we can understand without farther detail why love as a passion, it is our European specialty, must absolutely be of noble origin. As is well known, its invention is due to the Provençal poet Cavaliers, those brilliant, ingenious men of the Guy Sabre, to whom Europe owes so much and almost owes itself. Okay, so that was verse 260. 60. Yeah, that's a long verse. I want to comment on it. Well, it's the third time I'm reading this. It's hard to digest everything Nietzsche says because it's hard. But I thought about one thing. Yeah, so that I I always had this mind about like startup culture, and then I thought it's cool, it's like create the future, whatever. And he says that's more on the slave side, and noble ones are the ones who like prefer the status quo. I guess I'm not. I guess he's not saying which one's worse or better, but there is definitely like a difference in the way they look at the world, and it plays out differently. Uh, so, for example, at the country level, like noble, like existing powers are like a G7, uh, like United Nations Security Council, and now like China has been trying to expand the sphere of influence, and then you know old power like 20th century power like U.S., Japan, like France or Germany, they don't like it. They say like, oh, keep your sleeve like down, like keep it under control. Like they don't want their power to decline. It's more it's not materialistic or actual territorial, but more like a feeling, I guess you get. It's the ego that's threatened from this willed power because you do want to have like yeah, it's a strong, strange dynamic. People want to have control. A lot of countries want to be the powerful one that every other countries follow. And the basic example would be the language. The language like English. Everybody learns English in the world, and that's coming from the power that U.S. holds, economic power. And if people stop that, then Americans start to need to start learning other languages, which that part comes with the actual material cost. Like you gotta spend a lot of time, which I've done it to study English, and it's annoying, right? And you start watching other movies in different languages, and you understand it. So etc. etc. So that's a noble mindset versus slave mindset. That noble existing nobles want the existing system. That they like the status quo, and the new one, the slave ones want a fresh idea. So I guess democracy is more slave friendly or like fresh idea friendly. Like they can like change the system and then cycle through. So you do need that balance. If it tilts towards more on the slave side or like the more noble side, then it would be like more like a revolution and kind of very get more like Afghan style, maybe like just like overthrow the government and it becomes like very legit on the new system. So it's a balance. It seems like this like noble versus like existing system. Noble versus existing system, or like a old versus new system, or like noble existing noble friendly system versus like a new slave friendly system. So that's that. I feel like most media plays on the slave morality, though they like the revolution, like change in the system, slaves acting and become powerful and change the whole system, take over the country. I read a lot of mangas like that, like a kind of fantasy mangas, especially for boys. Like so, yeah, he did mention about like ideas such as like patience or hardworking, or the slave morality. And I grew up reading a manga called Naruto, and that's all about like being patient and like dedication, work hard, and he eventually became the top, the president. But he's saying, well, Nietzsche is saying that's the slave morality, and then I guess if you are already at the top, then you don't need to work hard. There's no patience or working hard. Yeah. I think it's culturally good though. This slave morality. Well, that's what Nietzsche calls slave morality. But if you grow up in that culture, then even the leaders follow that culture, and then that's how they keep the humility and not become like a tyrant. And you do not want that. So um, all the successful countries today do have a lot more like slave morality to keep the power in control and keep it fresh, and it doesn't go that corrupt. And there are a lot of corrupted countries in the world. So anyway, that was Beyond Good and Evil from Nietzsche, week 3 reading. Yeah, hopefully it's getting better. All right, so see you. Bye.